Hey, how's it going everyone? Carlo here from All You Can Board, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 games of 2020. I realize this video is probably a bit late for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously there was a pandemic. A lot of these games didn't get to the table as quick as I would have liked. And secondly, I have an 8.5-week-old baby now, and even the months leading up to that baby being born have been kind of a whirlwind. So, but I figured better late than never. In case you missed it, I recently did a video of kind of mini reviews of the 30 games in 2020 that didn't crack my top 10. So if you're curious to see what didn't crack my top 10, you're wondering some of these seem like odd picks to you or whatever, you can go watch that one either before or after. The other thing I just want to say real quick is that this is games that were released in North America in 2020. So a couple of these are probably listed as 2019 games on Board Game Geek. Similarly, there's two games that are listed as 2020 games, namely Hallertau and Fayum, which are going to be eligible for my best of 2021 list when I do that eventually, so those won't be eligible for this list here. But without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it, starting with my number 10 game, which is Wavelength. So this, there's a few different designers who designed this, but it's published by Palm Court. I believe it's the same design team that did Monikers. Anyway, basically it's a party game. It plays 2 to 12 players. Fantastic game. The basic idea, you can play it either cooperatively, like all together, or you can play it in 2 teams. If you're playing with more players, you want to do it as teams, or if you're only playing with like 2, 3, or 4, it's probably better to do it cooperatively. The idea is you have this device, I'm going to show you on the back of the box. It's basically this wheel with a dial, and you're going to take turns. One player is going to be giving a clue, and you're going to get a card that's going to have a scale, either it's like underrated to overrated, or hot to cold, or whatever. There's tons of cards in there with variety, and you're going to put the card in there, and you're going to spin this little device around with this private screen covering it, and then you're going to look behind the screen, and somewhere on that wavelength, on that dial, there's going to be a little scoring section that says either like 2 points if you're somewhere in here, 3 points if you're closer, or 4 points if you get it right in the middle. And the idea is wherever you are on that range of, let's say, underrated to overrated, you're trying to give your fellow players a clue. So one time we played, just for example, underrated object to overrated object. I think I said it was slightly in the overrated range, and I just said pocket knife. And you just watch the kind of debates happen, and people are trying to then guess because they can't see on the screen where the scoring is. So they're trying to spin this dial to say, I think it's over here. No, I think he would have put it over here. And people are arguing, well, no, a pocket knife does so much for you when you're out in the wild, this and that. And someone's like, well, yeah, but how many times have you brought it and not used it? Well, that doesn't mean it's overrated. And people get into these arguments, and the person who gives the clue can't say anything. You're just sitting there kind of waiting. Hilarious game. I think this is a game that functions in a few different ways. It can be an awesome icebreaker for kind of meeting new people, because you kind of get to learn about people and how they think about stuff, but also you're trying to give clues based on the people you know. And so if you think that someone, there's sometimes you're naming like an actor or a movie or whatever, or you're saying that something falls under a certain category, you kind of sometimes are playing to the people that you're trying to get to guess, right? The scoring system, you can play with the scoring, but a lot of the time these party games, the scoring doesn't really matter. You can even play with more than 12 players. It's such an awesome game. I've had so much fun with this, and I can't wait to play it in bigger groups in the near future. This is definitely going to stay in my collection for a while. And just the production value of this like dial that you're spinning, like it's really fun. The dramatic reveal when everyone sets it, and then you reveal and see where it was on the dial. Very fun game. I really highly recommend you check out Wavelength, my number 10 game of 2020. My number 9 game of 2020 is MICROMACRO Crime City. So this is designed by Johannes Sick, published by Pegasus Spiel. There's been some discussion online about whether this game actually counts as a game or an activity. I think it's kind of, I don't know if the unfair is the right word, but I think it's doing a bit of a disservice to the designer and artist of this game to say that it's not a game, considering the amount of effort and thought that has gone into this and how interesting and fun it is. This game has totally blown me away. I want to lend it to like everyone I know, or buy copies for people as a gift once I'm done playing it. So it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game where you're basically detectives. You're trying to solve cases. So it's Crime City. It comes with 16 different cases, and the basic idea is you open up this little envelope, and it starts with a card, and it says, and basically, the other thing is the game is just one giant map. Like it's a fold out black and white map, and it's a map of this giant city, but it's different moments in time. So you'll see people, you'll see someone, but if you look around near them, you'll see them somewhere else, and then you'll see them somewhere else, and you're backtracking and following and looking for clues. And you'll start off with a mission. It'll basically say, so-and-so's body was found on the east side of town in the park, and there was this object next to them. and you basically start solving the case. And the base version of the game, like the recommended or the basic way that you play the game is every time you look and you answer a question, it'll say like, what was the murder weapon? And then you'll see if you answered it correctly. And then you'll look at the next question, it'll say, you know, who committed the murder, and then you'll find that out. The advanced version, which is, I switched to the advanced version right on mission like 2 or 3 because it seemed like it was going to be way more fun and add to the replay value. You basically don't look at any of the cards. You basically, it just tells you the first thing, like find this dead body kind of thing, and then you look around and try and pick up all these details and solve the whole case, and then you basically go through the cards afterwards and see if you can answer all the questions. And if you get to a card that you haven't answered, then you can put the cards back down and go back. This has been such a joy for me to play through with my wife. I think this game works best at 2 players because these type of games where you like to play it, even though you can play it solo, the idea of solving something and you're in a room by yourself quietly and you're like, yes, I did it. And you kind of look around and you're like, oh, I don't have anyone to celebrate with. Kind of underwhelming, but I tried playing one of the cases with 4 people and it felt a little too congested with 4 people trying to lean over the table, and you know, you need really good light, so like people are casting shadows on the board, or you sometimes feel like you didn't contribute enough, or people are finding stuff out and you're like, oh, I wish I could have seen what happened there, oh, I didn't really get to contribute to that. I think 2 players is perfect because you're working together, you're like, you follow that person's trace, I'm gonna look over here, and there's like this narrative, like the world kind of evolves. The more you look around and you start seeing things and you see, sometimes you get distracted and you're like, what's going on here? Oh, that's probably for a future case. I shouldn't look. There's Easter eggs built into it. And it's basically like, it's like absolutely remarkable what this person has done designing this game with just a drawing of a map. It's basically Where's Waldo, but in like a game, puzzly, detective case form. There are some elements, I know it's kind of been branded sometimes as a family game, but there are some kind of like inappropriate themes, I would say. Like you might want to look into it a bit more before you go like introducing this to your kids if you're sensitive to like the amount of violence. And there's people like flashing people, there's, you know, a bit of nudity and stuff like that, so worth checking that out, or keeping an eye on that. But it's a fantastic game. I've had so much fun with it, and the cases really go up in scale. You'll be amazed at the amount of time that it takes you to solve these cases once you're getting near the end. I've done 14 of the 16 so far. The last 2 are 5-star. I've only done the ones that go up to 4 stars so far, and still, like, the last one took probably an hour, and there's pieces all over the map. Amazing game. They've already announced MICROMACRO Crime City 2 Full House, which will be coming out very soon. Hopefully you get a copy of that. If you haven't checked this out and you're looking for like kind of a puzzly detective game, especially to play with 2 players, I can't recommend this enough. MICROMACRO Crime City, very innovative game, and the only reason it's not higher on my list is because it's, once you've played through it, you're done. You know you've solved the cases, but they recommend you can put it up on your wall in your game room, have people come over, try and solve a case with them. Again, you can lend it out to people. It's a great gift. Excellent game. My number 8 game of 2020 is My City. This is designed by the Dr. Rainer Knizia and published by Cosmos. This game also kind of blew my mind. So Rainer Knizia has designed, I think, over 600 games, okay? He's one of the most prolific designers around. And as far as I know, I mean, I haven't played anywhere near all his games, but I don't think he had ever done a polyomino game, which is like the Tetris shapes. And I also don't think he had ever done a legacy game before. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you know this, let me know in the comments below. But I don't think he'd ever done either. And yet this guy goes and designs a polyomino legacy game. It's, I believe, 2 to 6 players or 1 to 6. I can't remember. Or no, 2 to 4, sorry. And you're basically, it's a scenario based, like I said, it's a legacy game. So you start off with a board, and it's just a city, and everyone starts at the same board, and basically you're playing through 24 scenarios. So there's 8 chapters, and each chapter is an envelope, and you play 3 like episodes or 3 scenarios in that chapter. And each chapter has its own set of rules, and over time you're going to be adding stickers to your board with like trees or rocks or things like that. I don't want to get too into the rules or how, like, what to look ahead to, because there's spoilers. Basically, you open up the chapter and you never know what's coming. The game evolves as you're going. Sometimes it adds rules or takes away rules, or the scoring changes, or you know where you start placing your tiles on the map changes from game to game. There's all kinds of stuff. I was really impressed with this, and it's not a very interactive game because basically you're just building on your own board, but sometimes you're having to be the first one to do something compared to the other person, or you compare with the other person's board at the end of the game. But the way it plays is awesome. There's just a deck of cards, like everyone has the same 24 pieces, 8 of 3 different colors, red, yellow, and blue, and every turn you're basically flipping a card from the deck, and it tells you which shape that both players have to place. So you're placing the same pieces, and you can look over and say, well, my opponent placed theirs there, I'm going to place mine here instead. Very cool game. Dylan and I played through this whole thing. We absolutely loved it. I was so impressed with this game. The only reason it's not higher on the list is that when the game is done and you've played the 24 missions, like, you can go back and play it again. And to be honest, I haven't had any desire to go back and play this game. I don't know if I ever will go back and play, like, the finished version of it. I would be open to trying and playing the legacy version again from the start with someone else, like playing in a bigger group, maybe down the line. Excellent family game. I think for what it sets out to do, Reiner Knizia basically just crushed it. Like, it's basically a perfect game in what it sets out to do. It's just, yeah, there's other games on my list that I feel like have more to bring me back, but one of the best experiences I had in 2020, and I highly recommend you check out My City. All right, number 7 for me on the list of 2020 is Calico. This is designed by Kevin Russ and published by AEG and Flatout Games, part of the Flatout collab project. So this is an awesome game. I mean, look at the artwork, okay? From Beth Sobel. Cats and quilts. If you're a cat lover, automatically you're probably interested in this game. But even if you don't really like cats or aren't crazy about cats, there's a lot to like here. Basically, it's a spatial puzzle. Everyone has their own board. I think there's 23 spaces or something like that, and 3 of the spots are going to have your scoring tiles, and those are going to be your objectives for the game. There's a big bag of tiles, and the tiles, there's 6 different colors and 6 different patterns. So every tile has a color and a pattern, and you're trying to surround these objective tiles in certain ways to meet the objectives, and every tile has 2 different objectives on it, where you can either meet the colors objective or the patterns objective. But if you meet both, you get a higher value of points. If you meet neither, you just get no points. So, it's a game with very conflicting priorities. I actually did a full review of this on our channel, so you can check out my review of Calico. I gave it a very positive review. I think it's an excellent game. Plays best at 2 players, in my opinion. Any player you add above 2, I don't think makes the game better. It's still fine, but it's a very brain-burny, like, it can be a frustrating game because you get to the end and you feel like, how did I not meet these goals? Like, it feels so tough. You have 2 tiles in your hand on your turn, and you're just placing one of the 2 and then drawing a new tile out of 3 that are on the board, so you're back up to 2. So, like, the rules are simple, and it feels like it should be easier than it is, and it can be frustrating because you're like, you end up with this quilt at the end of the game and you didn't get that many points, and you're like, how did I not meet these objectives? But and I think it has a great amount of randomness and this kind of luck mitigation too. I know people complained about, sometimes you don't get the right tiles, but you have these spots on your board where you can kind of sometimes tuck away these tiles where they're not going to hurt you as much. So you have this almost economy, this resource of free spaces to kind of ditch your tiles that aren't as good, or where you want to commit to putting them right around your objectives, but now you know that you have to surround with certain colors or patterns. Very satisfying game. It also has a solo mode. It's got achievement mode in here, these challenge modes, the dual layered player boards. Like, the bang for your buck on this game is some of the best I've seen in a long time. It's like a $30 game, $35 maybe. Everything is so high quality, very well designed. I've played this a lot with my wife already. This is going to stay in our collection probably forever. Highly recommend Calico. It's a fantastic game. All right, that was my number 7. On to my number 6, which is NIDAVELLIR, or NIDAVELLIR. Not sure exactly how you pronounce it. This is designed by Serge Laget and published by GRRRE Games. This is also on Board Game Arena in case you want to try it out, but it's basically a game of set collection, card drafting, and bidding. So you're basically, the long and short of it is, there's 5 different types of cards, each have a different color, and you're trying to draft an army of these dwarves to have the most impressive army to be selected by the king to fight this dragon. You don't actually fight the dragon in the game. The whole idea is drafting the army, and the cards score in different ways. So kind of like what I mentioned about Calico, it's a game of conflicting priorities where the game is incentivizing you to specialize in one color or type of dwarf, because they each have their own, there's orange and blue and red and purple and whatever, and they all score in different ways. One is like exponential, like root squared or whatever scoring, like multiplicative scoring. Some of them are, you have different symbols, and the more symbols you have, they multiply by the number of cards with that color, sort of thing. Other ones kind of have some player interaction, like the warriors. But so you're trying to specialize, sort of, because your points get exponentially higher in each color, but as soon as you have one card of each of the 5 colors, you get to recruit a hero card for free, which is like this other side thing of cards where you get these heroes that have special abilities. Some of them have colors, other ones are neutral, and they go into their own section. So there's a lot to think about in terms of, when do I want to specialize and take these cards that might add to my color that I already have a lot of, or where do I want to get that 5th one to trigger it, and when do I want to get that hero? And it's got this coin building system where everyone starts the game with these coins that you're bidding on. So at the start of every round, you place bids in these taverns, 3 different taverns, which is where the cards are that you can draft. And that determines what order you're picking in. You might be first pick, second, third pick, whatever. It plays 2 to 5 players. It plays in probably about 45 minutes. And then you get to upgrade your coins throughout, which allow you to win more bids. But when you place those higher coins to upgrade, then you can't use them for the bidding that round, so you have to choose, okay, do I want to use my bigger coins to win bids, or do I want to be okay with losing bids and getting last pick in order to spend this round upgrading my coins for later? And then halfway through the game, there's this kind of like assessment phase where you go through each of the 5 colors of dwarves, and the players who have the most in that color get these bonuses. Really good game. This one totally caught me by surprise. One of the better drafting games I've played in a while, and the fact that it has this coin building system and plays really quickly, and there's a lot of different paths to victory. I've played this like probably about 10 times, and I've won with a bunch of different strategies, and I've seen other people win with different strategies. It's not like, oh, once you play it, you've kind of figure out this way to win. I think it's an excellent game. 45 minutes right on the box, 2 to 5 players, and it plays really well at all player counts. I think it's probably best at 3 or 4, but even with 2 players where I thought it wouldn't be as good, it was still a great game. Really impressed with NIDAVELLIR. There's an expansion as well called THINGVLIR. I also reviewed this on the channel a little while ago, so you can check out my full review, but highly recommend you check this game out. That is my number 6 game of 2020. Next up, my number 5 game, Dune Imperium. So you might have heard of this one. It's designed by Paul Dennen, the same designer as Clank, which you might be familiar with, and this is published by, is it Direwolf Games? Yes, Direwolf Games. So this is a mix of deck building and worker placement, and obviously Dune is all the rage these days, right? The movie just came out. There's tons of Dune games being made. I bought this and I actually went back and read the book before playing the game because I'd never read the book and I wanted to kind of like get into the theme a bit more. I know some people have criticized this for saying, oh, it doesn't feel much like a Dune game. It feels like the Dune theme is tacked on. I don't feel like it's extremely thematic, but I think the criticism of saying it doesn't feel like a Dune game, I think is a little off. I don't agree with that. It is definitely a fairly thematic game, but I really like what this does. There's games that this gets compared a lot to Lost Ruins of Arnak, because that was another big game from 2020 that had mixed deck building and worker placement. I do think Dune Imperium did it a bit better. It's a bit more interesting to me. There's more player interaction. The decisions are tougher. And I love the way that basically you have this spot of, like this board of worker placement actions and spots, but each of the places has it's restricted to a certain house. So like the Fremen or the Bene Gesserit or whatever, and basically your cards in your hand all have symbols on the side that determine like which of those spots you can actually go to. So depending which cards you play for their abilities, they determine kind of where you can go and which actions you can even take. And all the actions are thematic. I mean, there's the sand and water as very important resources are in there. You can get mentats. You can create alliances or forge alliances with different houses that give you more benefits and give you more points, and it's basically a race to 10 points. And the combat system is cool. Every round there's like high stakes. There's these combat cards that come up, these conflicts, and you have troops that you can move into these conflicts. And when that phase gets revealed, you have these kind of like intrigue cards that you can play for some last minute kind of like behind the scenes politics, kind of political stuff, and like kind of backstabbing. Very, very interesting game. I have really enjoyed playing this. I've played it once solo, once with 2 players, and once with 3. I think it has worked well at all player counts. I think it's probably best as a 3-player game. I think adding a 4th would just make it take a little too long without adding enough more meat to the game. I think 3 is the sweet spot, but it plays really well solo as well and 2 players. The solo game basically just simulates a 2-player game, but the kind of bot that you play against does it really well. And you also have kind of like what's it called? Player powers, where you can be, the Duke Leto Atreides, you can be the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, or you can be Paul, and you start with an ability, and it's just a really interesting game. I don't know if years and years from now it'll stay in my collection long term, but I've really enjoyed playing it. Very impressed with it. I wish it was maybe a little bit shorter, but the rulebook's really well done, and it's easy to get into and easy to teach people. Excellent game. I really want to play this a lot more. That is Dune Imperium. All right, now on to my number 4 game, and this is where I think the games take a serious step up. Dune Imperium was really good too, but these last 4 is kind of like a step up from the rest, I would say. So my number 4 game of 2020 is Cosmic Frog. This is designed by James Felly and published by Devious Weasel Games. I've never played a game with a theme like this before at first. You're basically a 2-mile high, immortal intergalactic frog, and you are how do I say this? You start off with superpowers. Basically, there's this giant map that is this planet, and there are shards of the planet that are going to be breaking off. You're going to be basically chewing off or storing shards from this planet. Literally, pieces of the planet are going to come off the board. You're going to put them on your player board, where you store them into your gullet as this giant frog, and then you want to leap off the planet into the ether to then disgorge the contents of your gullet into your interplanetary vault. So the stuff that's happening on the main board feels very like, it's considered, they call it like Ameritrash, where it's very fighty, very like, you know, you can kick people, like jump at people and attack people to steal stuff from their gullet or knock them off the planet and stuff like that. And you can also, but like when the scoring mechanics feel very Euro-y, like it's very like kind of you have your own board and you have to lay down these like pieces of the planet in certain formations and line them up. So it feels like the scoring is very like sort of calculative, and but players can still steal the tiles when they're off your board too. Like, and the craziest thing about this game, and one of my favorite things about it, is the random deck order. So like, let's say you're playing with 4 players and everyone gets, I think it's like 5 or 6 turn cards in this deck. You don't just take turns clockwise around the board. You shuffle up this deck of cards and you flip it and see whose turn is it. So you might get like 3 turns in a row at the start, and then you might be flipping a card. Oh, it's this person's turn. Okay, now it's that person's turn. You might then get like, you might not go for like 9 or 10 turns in a row. The turn order, there's a lot of randomness in the way the turns play out. You always have a special power, but you can keep it face down to sort of just get like certain benefits from it. But when you reveal the power, then everyone knows what you have and you get this additional kind of power. This is one of the most unique games I've ever played. I've only played it once, and it was with 3 or 4 players. I can't remember. It plays 2 to 6. I think probably 3, 4, 5 is probably the sweet spot. I mean, it could still be awesome with 6. I have no idea. With 2, I hear it's a little too empty, too spaced out, not enough player interaction, but this is an incredible game. I've never really seen something like this done before. Hats off to James Felly. Apparently a lot of his games are like this. This is the only game of his I've played so far. This is one I cannot wait to get back to the table. Like, it's hilarious. It's a lot of fun. I'm the type of person who doesn't normally like a lot of games. Like, if a game has a lot of randomness, a lot of chaos, stuff that's out of your control, I normally don't like those games to be too long. And this game takes probably, at least it says on the box 45 to 90 minutes. I think realistically at minimum an hour. Like, the setup is a bit long too. But for a game that plays this long, like, I think I just went into it with the right mindset. You have to accept that there's chaos, there's things out of your control, but it's how you navigate that chaos and how you make sense of this and how you deal with the random turn order and people coming after you. And, it might not always be that you feel like the player who played best wins. There might be something that feels kind of lucky or unlucky, or the game ends before you got a certain number of turns compared to other players or whatever. But it's, I think no matter what, win or lose, like when I played it, everyone had a blast and wanted to play it again. I can't wait to get this back to the table. That is Cosmic Frog. Now onto the final 3, and this is probably another step up in terms of like the quality of game. Like, these next 3 games are probably going to be among my, I don't know, top 20, 30, maybe not 20, all of them, but like top 30, 40 games of all time. These are amazing, amazing games, all of them. Number 3 is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. This is designed by Thomas Singh and published by Cosmos. It shows 3 to 5 players on the box. There is a variant for 2 players, but I think it does work best probably with 3 or 4. It's a cooperative trick-taking game with limited communication, or restricted communication. And of all the games I've played in those categories, it's my favorite of all those. So it's my favorite cooperative game, favorite trick-taking game, and absolutely favorite restricted communication game. So you basically have these cards of different colors. It's just cards with like colors and numbers. There's a bit of a theme where you're in space and you're, on the quest for this Planet 9. And it's a scenario-based, like mission-based game. There's 50 missions in the box. I've played through the first 25 so far. This is maybe the best bang for your buck in board games, or at least in the last while that I've seen. Like, it's such an inexpensive game. It's basically just a deck of cards with some little cardboard tokens for the communication tokens and stuff, but the basic idea is that you're trying to meet certain objectives. So you'll have things that come out that say like, and there's a bit of a loose kind of story, a loose narrative from mission to mission, but you're trying to complete these missions where it says like, you have to win, a certain player has to win this trick with this card, or this player has to win this card. And as you get further in, it's going to say you have to win them in this order. but you can't communicate verbally at all. The only communication you can do is every player gets one communication token or a radio token, and once in each mission, you can use that token and put it on a card. You can play a card face up in front of you. You're not actually playing it as like part of the trick that's being up for grabs, but you just put it down in front of you, and you put the token either on the top of the card to say it's the highest one of that, the highest number of that color in your hand, the bottom of the card to say it's the lowest, or you put it in the middle of the card to show that's the only one of that color. So there's some really cool stuff there where, like, let's say I had like a 1, a 2, and a 7 of pink in my hand, and I want to communicate something to the other players. Well, I wouldn't want to just say play the card with the play that 7 with the card on the top to say the highest card in my hand is a 7, because, well, the cards only go up to 9. That's not giving a whole lot of information. But if I first play that 7 on a trick, and then on a future turn, I put down a pink 2, and I put that it's the highest card in my hand, well, if I had said it was the only card, then they would know that, but now that I've said the highest card in my hand is a pink 2, now they know, oh, I also have a 1. So there's a lot you can communicate in a very subtle way, and that's the big draw to the game, is you're trying to figure out, how do I let my fellow teammates know what cards I have of which color, and at what point do I use that single bit of communication that I can use? And there's so much, like, whether you win or lose, every round can take, 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever. Whether you win or lose the round, people are laughing at the end saying, oh, and when you did that, I thought that you were kind of trying to tell me this. And they're like, no, I was trying to tell you about this card. And, oh, okay, let's go again. This is, for such a small box game, and a game that's like plays in these quick rounds, this has already had, there's been at least twice where I've played this, and it basically, like, this was the game night. We thought, oh, I'll start with a couple rounds of the crew, and then we just played the crew for a while because it's so good, it's so addictive, it's such an achievement, I think, in, again, that, like, it's a cooperative game that doesn't have any even room for quarterbacking because of the way the communication is so limited, and every round, one player is kind of like the leader of the mission, and so you're the one who's divvying out these tasks to people, so you have that kind of added feeling of responsibility where when things go wrong, people are like, why did you assign me this mission? It was basically impossible based on my hand. And you're like, I don't know, it's so tough, but it's such a good game. I can't say enough things about this. There's, every once in a while you might get a mission where it feels like it was kind of impossible or really tough to achieve based on the distribution of the cards and the missions or whatever. There's some randomness that can sometimes make it feel that way. They appear to have addressed this. The crew mission Deep Sea just came out a couple months ago, I think. Absolutely, I think we just got a copy of it. We're going to be playing it hopefully soon. We should have some stuff up on our channel. And I should mention, Dylan did a how to play video and a review of this on our channel, so if you want any more info about it, go check it out. If for some reason you haven't played this yet, go check it out on Board Game Arena or get yourself a copy. One of the most impressive games I've played in a long time. I can't recommend this enough. That is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. Okay, on to my final 2 games of the year. These ones kind of went back and forth for a little while. They have some similarities between them, and I'm going to get to that maybe when I talk about the number 1 game. I'm going to start with the number 2 game. Oh, one quick thing. You'll probably notice a theme in a lot of these games. I usually like, a lot of my favorite games are ones that have a high amount of complexity from a low amount of rules. So basically, the heavier the rules of a game are, the more I think the game has to be better. I don't want to learn more, like spend more and more time learning rules if the game isn't going to reward me with, the fun and the complexity that those rules require. So that's really a theme of these last 2 games, is a very simple rule set that just extracts so much depth and replayability. Number 2 on my list here is RENATURE. Designed by the team of Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. They've designed tons of games together, but Michael Kiesling you probably recognize most from Azul. Wolfgang Kramer has done, El Grande, Six Nymph, tons of other games. Been around for a long time. These guys have tons of Spiel des Jahres awards between them. Published by Capstone Games. This is... Don't let the artwork fool you. I reviewed this on the channel. You can go check out my full review for more thoughts, but it looks like this kind of like peaceful, friendly game. There's just, a really nice tree and some animals, a squirrel in the tree. It's like this beautiful kind of inviting game, but it is so brutal, so cutthroat. You might not have to play it that way, but this game just has... It's so interactive and can be so mean, but in a good way, and you kind of have to know that going into it, and there's some rules built in that may basically make it so that you have to play that way. So the basic idea is it's a domino based game, and you have all these dominoes, and every whip starts with a certain number of dominoes depending on player count, and on the dominoes there's different animals, and you're basically starting your again, the name of the game is Renature, so you're like renaturing an area. So you're basically building out, putting these animals, and then trees are sprouting up and stuff, and you have a player board with these different size plants that can either be size 1, 2, 3, or 4, but you also have neutral plants. So the idea is you're going to place a domino, and then on one of the adjacent places to the domino, you can put a tree or a plant of whatever size, and you're going to score points. And if there's more plants in there that are that size or smaller, you're going to score even more points if there are already more plants there. But where this game becomes interesting, there's a few different things. First off, there's these neutral pieces. So everyone has pieces of their own color as well as pieces of a neutral color on their board. And when you place them, they still score the same way, but there's scoring that happens when an area is fully enclosed by dominoes. And then the scoring basically is an area majority thing where the player with the highest total value of their plants will score the highest value of points, and the player with the second highest will score the second value of points. But if two players are tied, let's say the first most and the fourth most are tied, then those cancel each other out completely, and then it would actually be the second player who scores. So you can do some really cool stuff, and the neutral player, even though the neutral player doesn't get points because everyone has stuff for the neutral player, you can use them to deny players, and they can still be the one who gets the most points in the area, so you can lose out to the neutral player. So you can place neutral pieces literally just to basically screw over your opponents. Very cool stuff there. And then there's also this cloud system where you have these cloud tokens, and this is where the game really gets interesting. I think the game is, and I think a lot of people underestimate this aspect of the game because it's not one of those games where every turn has these big explosive moves. Like, it starts off slowly. The first few turns can just be a little like, I guess I'll place this here, whatever. But it kind of is this building, like there's this tension that kind of gets bottled up throughout the game. And you have these clouds that you can use to kind of break the rules of the game, either to take another turn or to change the wild suit on the dominoes so that you can go somewhere else on the board, or to take back a plant from somewhere else to change the dynamic of the majorities there. And I think people underestimate maybe if you're not playing it like really cutthroat, or if you use your clouds too early, but the best games of Renature I've had, and I've played it I think at all player counts now, the best games of Renature I've had are when someone comes out of nowhere at like the halfway point or 3/4 point of the game or near the end with this move that nobody saw coming, where you pull off a plant somewhere and then you place something to surround something, you change the dynamics of the scoring, and then you spend clouds to take a second turn, and suddenly everyone just goes, whoa, like it has these crazy moments in the game where suddenly you have this massive turn where you just completely flip the game on its head. And then at the end, like, there's just so much to love about this game. And the way it kind of trickles out from the top, and you build down to these more valuable spaces at the bottom of the board, but you don't want to put dominoes close so that someone else can latch onto your dominoes to then go into those bigger spaces. So there's a lot of like trying to suss out what your opponents are doing, and it really is a game of patience. When are you going to make that one big play or those two big plays with your dominoes or with your clouds to kind of like try and make a big swing on the area majority in one area? I absolutely love this game. The other thing I want to mention real quick is that at the end of the game, all of your plants that are left on your board, you lose points for. So people could say like, oh, I don't want to play this game, mean, I just want to place my neutral pieces. Well, then you're going to lose points for them. So like, there's no point going into this game thinking you don't want to play it mean, because you're just basically asking to lose. Like, playing this game is essentially a social contract saying, I'm going to play a mean game where I have to try and deny people points, otherwise I'm just accepting that I'm going to lose. Amazing game. Setup can take a bit of time. It probably plays best at 2 or 3 players. I think with 4 it takes a bit long, but 3 players is probably the sweet spot. Still amazing at 2. Such a great game. Only a few pages of rules. The rulebook's very well done. Can't recommend this enough. Go play Renature. We'll put this up here. And on to my number 1 game of 2020. Should have mentioned, by the way, The Crew was one of those ones that has a 2019 release date, and so does my number 1 game, Babylonia. This came out in 2019 in Europe, but only got to North America in 2020. So this is designed by Reiner Knizia. It's the second game of his, I believe, on my list for this year, and it's published by Ludonova. This game is so good. Plays 2 to 4 players. On the box it says 60 minutes, but honestly it depends on the player count. With 2 players, I think even the first time I played it, it played like half an hour. I've played it again with 2 players since then. I think we played it in 25 minutes. The more players, the longer it's going to take. And you basically use more of the board with more players. If you're playing with 2 or 3, you only use certain sections. Basically, it's a tile-laying game where every player starts with a certain number of these tiles. You either have nobles, which there's 3 different types of nobles. I think there's 6 of each of them. And then you have, I think it's 18 of these farmers. And on your turn, you're either placing any 2 tokens, whether they're nobles or farmers, any 2 tokens at all, or you can place 3 or more farmers, as long as they're all farmers. So the turns are like throughout the game. You're gonna have some turns where you can only place 2 tiles. Sometimes you're gonna place 4 or 5 when you have all this pack of farmers on your little tray of 5 tokens that you can hold at once. And you're basically trying to connect trade routes throughout. It's set in like the kind of Neo-Babylonian Empire, and you're kind of making these trade routes. There's the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and you're kind of going across the rivers, and there's ziggurats that you're fighting over. There's like kind of area majority stuff where the player who, like when a ziggurat gets surrounded, whoever has the majority there is going to get like a special ability token or tile that you take that's going to give you some power for the rest of the game, where you maybe now you can hold 7 tiles on your board or on your little tray, or you have an ability where you can place your tiles differently, like the rules change for you a little bit. And then you're also trying to surround cities, and when you get cities, you're scoring for all your connected routes. So there's this route building aspect, but it's very cutthroat because you want to cut people off. If you see someone building from one side and another side, and they've got different or nobles of the same type, you don't want them to have this big chain of scoring. So on your turn, instead of going somewhere where it gets you points, you might want to go and place your tiles where you're cutting someone off somewhere. It's a very, like, it's a shared board. It can get very interactive. The rule book is literally like 3 or 4 pages. You can teach this game in about 10 minutes or less. There's a how to play video on our channel. I haven't actually reviewed this one, partially because RENATURE has a bunch of tile laying games, and I would like to have played a bit more of some of his older ones before comparing this to them. But this game has completely blown me away. I mean, at all player counts, it's phenomenal. It plays so quick, the turns just kind of fly by, and every game feels significantly different, and it feels like there's a high skill level. Like, I've played it maybe 4 or 5 times, and every time I feel like, man, I really want to play this again and try like doing this time, or like every time I play, I feel like I'm picking up on something else. And you can play your tiles face down sometimes, like in the river, so that people don't know, was that a farmer or was that a noble? Lots of cool stuff here. And again, this and Renature, the reason I brought up before is the amount of complexity and replay value and stuff that this squeezes out of such a simple rule set. I feel like this is a game I can pull out on any game night. Again, you can play even with 4 players in under an hour with the rules explanation. Amazing, amazing game. I highly recommend you check out Babylonia, my #1 game of 2020. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, there were 30 other games from 2020 that I played that didn't make this list. If you haven't gone and checked out that video, I'll put a link to it in the description below. You can go check out which games didn't make the list. Again, there were a whole bunch. It was tough to narrow it down to 10, but ultimately these 10 were the ones that I think are going to have the highest chance of staying in my collection long term, are the ones that made the biggest impression on me overall, even if they have certain flaws, and other games might have things that sort of might be better about them. I just want to quickly mention there were a bunch of games from 2020 that I didn't get to play that I think might have had a chance of making this list if I had played them. Quickly, I'll just rattle them off. There was Imperial Spells and Steam, Scapegoat, Tidal Blades, Bonfire, Merv, the Heart of the Silk Road, Whistle Mountain, The Cost, Dwellings of Eldervale, Gods Love Dinosaurs, High Rise, Fairabend, and Forgotten Waters. There's probably a bunch of others I'm missing, but in case you're wondering, how come this game didn't make the list? But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what your top 10 games of 2020 were. Are any of these a surprise to you? Think I left any off the list that should have made the list? I'd be curious to hear what you think and what your list was like. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more videos like this. Otherwise, thanks as always, and I'll see you next time.